to introduce our guest speaker, who you've all tuned in to hear. He's joining us from across the big pond in London. Tom Schneider is here to introduce him.
Actually, I'm going to introduce...
You're going to introduce the introducer.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Norm McCarville and let him introduce Mo for us. You unmute yourself, Norm.
Okay, you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Just as a quick aside about peace, our district and club have been slowly getting into peace the last few years, but our club is working with a club in San Diego with Rotary Peace Scholars. We currently have a lady from Afghanistan studying in San Diego and a young lady from Beirut, Lebanon's coming to San Diego to study as a peace scholar. So our club's been involved in peace that way. But now for Mo, you had a long bio sent to everybody, mostly about some of his activities, but there's a lot to say about Mo, but I can say that I met him a few years ago through my contacts with the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park and his working with the India's Peace Park. And we became friends fairly quickly. Mo's a terrific fellow. He's got a nice family, and he's a good person to know and very enthusiastic about peace. The reason he's started talking about prejudice and that sort of thing is across North America and across the world, there's a lot of talk about discrimination, shootings, that sort of thing. So talk about racism that has increased in the last year or so. And a few months ago, I had a Zoom meeting with Mo about when I was younger, our university in Ontario, the town that I lived in, started accepting international students. And they weren't all accepted in a friendly manner. And it's always sort of been in the back of my mind about, some discrimination right in my own backyard. So Mo and I talked about that for a while. That led me to inviting him to our Nelson Club for a bit of a lecture or talk on discrimination from his point of view in London. And that leads him to being here today. So I'd like to introduce Mohammed Ayyaz from London. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so much, Norm, for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me to your club earlier. And it's because of you I'm in this mess. Anyway, jokes aside, it's like actually being on a Zoom call, excuse me, with family, because everyone here is probably interested in peace. Everyone's got a knowledge of peace and their experience of peace. And especially I'm glad to see Casey's here. And thank you again, Tom, for inviting me. And Rudy's there as well, because I fondly remember our adventure to the Peace Conference in Ontario, which was such a success. I know it's a very sensitive topic. Going from any country to another country is difficult. And I know we met to do with the Indian Peace Park project, and we're carrying on with the Indian Peace project, and that is what is our sort of main priority. But before I start, I'd like to send our greetings from our club. I'm privileged to be a member of the Rotary Club of London, which is the first Rotary Club outside of North America. And our President Dave sends his greetings and best wishes to you, President Skip, and all your club. And the fantastic work that you're doing regarding peace polls and working in protected areas of the world with your time capsules, and then with peace in general. You're doing so many different projects to do with water, to do with honeys and bees and the ecology, etc. So it's wonderful what you're doing. And congratulations on what you're doing for the environment as well as peace. My story began really, I don't know if there's a PowerPoint presentation there that maybe we can start. I'm not going to try and make everyone kind of fall asleep here, but I'll be quick as possible with this. This presentation, I've decided to call The Other. As I said before, I'm lucky enough to be a Rotarian here in London, but the Rotary family is worldwide, so every Rotary club is home. Next slide, please. London is very famous, as you know. It's famous for its history. It's famous for its architecture. It's famous for many historical things, as well as obviously the East India Company, the British Raj, etc. So it's got so much history. Next slide, please. This is the situation we're all in at the moment. We're all in a situation where we can't really do the things that we wanted to do. It's almost like being placed on a reset button, and many activities and aspirations we had have kind of been put to halt. So, I'd like to reflect also on the people that are not with us at the moment and the incredible trauma that the world's going through because of this horrid illness. And I wish everyone the best as far as that's concerned. But obviously, practically, it's led to this situation. This is very common in our club and maybe in other clubs. And that's not my wife in the background, but that's probably our president. So we're doing everything on Zoom. But every challenge, in whichever arena, also opens an opportunity. So we're on this Zoom meeting. I'm talking to colleagues and family, Rotary family across the world, thanks to this Zoom and the technology. So change is a big thing for everyone, especially technical change, but obviously in the peace area, changing oneself and opening oneself up. Next slide, please. This picture I discovered from my father's possessions. Here, my heritage is from Punjab in Pakistan, and as many of you know, the Indian subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan. That is my father humbly meeting the Shah of Iran. And next to him is the President Liaquat Ali of Pakistan. And he was a very humble military man, a soldier. There were two brothers. He was lucky enough to be in the signals, in the British Indian Army signals, intercepting messages from Russia. And his older brother was in Burma, in the jungles of Burma, fighting during the Second World War. The British, when they left the Indian subcontinent, obviously had a lot of rebuilding to do, and they needed people to come and help. And the most loyal of, I suppose, their people, so to speak, during the Raj, were the soldiers and the military. So a lot of military people, including my father, were given vouchers to come into Britain to help rebuild. And he came to this country to work here. And he ended up, bringing his family here. His intention was just to work and then go back. But we all ended up here. It's a lovely place to obviously be. And he came here to do, I suppose, his public servant duty extension of that. Next slide, please. This is what I talk about change. Obviously, we're going through a change at the moment. Everyone wants change, but nobody's, or hardly anyone, really wants to open up to change. So it's, when we were talking earlier about all this, media, fake media or fake news or whatever you want to call it, everyone is kind of, in a sense, listening in echo chambers to their own views, because the internet and everything else we get at the moment allows you to pigeonhole yourself. There was a time when people were forced to be pigeonholed, but in a sense, sometimes we choose to be pigeonholed. Next slide, please. As our colleague said earlier, the four-way test. I'm going to speak about an occasion which happened to me because I think it was instrumental. The club is doing a lot of work with young people, the Peace Pole, and educating people worldwide in terms of peace, etc. But when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remember walking to school. I was a bit late for school. That's that's how we are when we're young. Sometimes we don't get up on time. I'm walking to school with my bag, and I'm trying to get to school. And behind me come a crowd or gang of white youths, all skinheads, shouting at me. And I looked behind, and they're shouting a word which is the equivalent of the N-word for black people, which is Paki. Get the Paki, get the Paki. I ran towards the school, but I couldn't get there in time or to the gate, and they started to beat me up. So you can imagine this, I'm being beaten up on the floor in a fetus position and there's nothing I can do. And while I'm there, they're beating me, kicking me, etc. I notice between my arms, there's a couple walking by, and they're a white couple. They're walking by and they look, then they turn their head away. Then they carry on walking. The gang finish a few more kicks and punches, and I'm on the floor, helpless. And then they run off to find their next victim. This was in the 1970s. Those people were from a group called the National Front, a far-right group. I somehow got onto my feet and staggered to the gate and went into my classroom, through the hall into my classroom. As I went into my classroom with a bloody nose, my teacher came to me. Now, in those days, and I don't know if it's still the case in education, but in primary schools, there tends to be more female teachers than male teachers. And in high school or secondary school, as we call it here, we have more male teachers as well, and there's a nice balance there. But he was one of the few primary school teachers. And his pastime was a sport called rugby, which similar to your American football, without any of the protection. And he stood, really tall and very stern. And he had a moustache, which was familiar to maybe a sergeant major. And he was a very strict teacher. And he saw the state that I was in. And I expected him basically maybe just to give me a tissue, wipe my nose, sit down, and a glass of water. He was fuming. He was going to, boil over. I'd never seen him that angry before. Obviously, he's a strict teacher, but not that angry. He got a tissue, gave me the tissue, said to another teacher, would you keep an eye on this class? And then said to me, follow me. And he took me to the car park, into his car, and he drove out of the school. And his intention was to find that gang. He's a white teacher, but to me, I was in a state of shock, thinking, well, what's he doing? What's he doing? And I was scared myself. What are we going to do when we find this gang? What's he going to do? Never seen him like that before. He went round, he spent at least 10 minutes going around the local streets trying to find this gang. Couldn't find the gang, and he came back. In that half an hour, my life had turned completely upside down. I'd never experienced racism before like that, of a violent nature, and it shocked me. And it was to act as a stimulus for what I was going to do in the future. I got through that day, and I realized there is a big difference between those who walk by and those who stand with you. And this four-way test is all about that. It's about not looking at someone's color, religion, creed, etc., but looking at a situation and trying to do what's best. And what he wanted to do was protect me, at the same time catch these criminals. A few weeks later, we live in a neighborhood which is very diverse. And we had a white neighbor. Her name was Gladys. And she was very friendly with our family. Our family, my father was working class, doing manual work. He'd come, to put food on our table. And he had a very strict attitude in terms of anything that you bring into the house must be legitimate. If you bring any food that's come by means that are not legal, then that food is like poison. So he would work 12-hour shifts sometimes and be, sleeping during the day. And as kids, we never really went out the house. And Auntie Gladys said to us one day, have you been to the seaside? Recently. She presumed we'd been to the seaside. We'd never seen the seaside. We said, no, we haven't. And she said, well, I'll take you there. And we said, well, it depends. Parents, what they say. And my mother and obviously the family were very close. And so, yeah, go ahead. It's Auntie Gladys. You'll be okay. And we went to a seaside resort called Southend. And she took us in her car, took us to Southend. And that was the second time I'd experienced racism. As we were going towards the sandy area and taking our picnic and everything else we had along, a few young youth, again, white youths, turned to her and said, "Paki lover." We were scared. She turned around and gave them a two-finger salute. But she wasn't frightened. She was a very, robust woman in a sense of very principled. And she did that for us. And I can never forget how we felt. We felt, yes, a shock at what someone had said to her, but look at the courage of Gladys. She didn't mind what happened. She was going to do what she thought was right. Next slide, please. Rotary has always been about bringing people together, bringing people around the table, looking for solutions where other people sometimes can't find solutions. And we as Rotarians try and do what we can to facilitate that. One of my first jobs, or voluntary work, not paid job, but voluntary work, was to work for an organization, a voluntary organization called the Citizen Advice Bureau here in the UK. And they give free advice to any person. Any citizen can go to them for advice. So if you need advice on rent arrears, housing, welfare benefits, consumer law, you would go to the Citizen Advice Bureau and get free advice. They train you up to give impartial advice, non-judgmental, confidential advice. And most importantly, they gave the training or the mindset, which I got to this day, which is anyone that you're trying to help, you can give all the options available, but it's always up to the people concerned what they decide to do. And you basically give them the menu and you help support them and you empower them to make their decisions. And that's always stuck by me in my various jobs in the community. And when I got paid employment, again, it was similar, a stay put scheme, a charity to enable elderly people and disabled people stay within their homes and not go into care. So it could be simple adaptations such as ramps or disabled facility, such as level access showers, etc. Small things that would make a big difference to their lives. And that caring attitude had always been there. But I had never come across this brilliant organization called Rotary. And later on in my life, one of my mentors, last year's District Governor, Tony Sharma, I met him, got into Rotary many years ago, and never looked back. Next slide, please. This is what we do, Rotary. We connect people. We go to other people, people come to us, we sit around a table and we try and find solutions. We are solution planners. We don't like the status quo. We like to make sure that everyone is around the table. We may agree to disagree on other issues in life, but when it comes to the community, we get together and we see what works for the community. And that is what interested me in Rotary, and I joined Rotary. It was an extension of community service. Next slide, please. This is, on the left-hand side, you have Tony Sharma, who's the immediate past District Governor of London. He broke the glass ceiling. He's the first District Governor for London from an Indian heritage. He is Hindu Punjabi. I am Muslim Punjabi. And our passion has been India, Pakistan, and their relationship. And in the middle there, some of you may know, is Memon, who is the person in charge of polio in Pakistan, and he's got a massive mission himself. And that is in London when Tony became District Governor. Next slide, please. This is a combination of working with Case as our leader in the India Peace Park project. We had this audacious plan, which we are working on. People fight for land, wherever you are, whether it's with your neighbors sometimes or elsewhere, it's land, land, land. Never has the principle or creative solution come up where we say to two conflicting countries, give us your land. You give us half the land, you give us half the land, we'll make a land for everyone. And that's our intention with the India Peace Park project. And we got together, as you can see, many, many people from the subcontinent, armed services, etc., MPs, lords and ladies, who have the same, passion for peace. It's just nobody thinks it's possible, but Rotary can make it possible. Next slide, please. This is me trying to make a speech. And as you can tell from my presentation here, it's not an easy thing to present in front of such distinguished people. Part of me wanted to sing an Elvis song and just entertain people, but we can't do that. But it was a lovely occasion in the most proper sense, because you had the right people in the room. It really felt so comfortable. And looking back at this, my late father, at the time, I was thinking to myself, he would have been so proud of me there in Parliament, speaking to lords, ladies, and other distinguished Rotarians about a peace project. He came from a British India where Hindus, Muslims, Christians, everyone was the same. It was because of him I did a DNA test and found out that I have relatives who are Hindu, who are Sikh, who are Christian, and you won't believe it, I've got Jewish relations as well. And this comes to the main point. The main point is, if the politicians spent time looking at themselves, do a DNA blood test, they would find that they have got more in common than they have which separates them. Here in the UK, those same people, the gang that beat me up, if they did a DNA test, they would find that there is no such thing as a pure British person. They've got Italian blood, French blood, and other blood as well. And I think that connection, when you look at oneself and think that what is it that we actually need in life, we just need three things, as I say, in our culture, in the Indian culture or subcontinent: roti, kapra or makan, which means clothes, place to live, and a house, and something to eat and clothes to wear. Simple things which are universal. If your neighbor is hungry and you have food, in any religion, or those people who have no religion, it is a humanitarian thing to do, to look after your neighbor. It starts at home. And what I've realized, and my father's sort of belief system, and it's kind of come to me, and many other people feel the same way, is whatever your religion that you follow, dogma that you follow, or religion or no religion, the basis is humanity. If any religion or any structure is built on anything else, it's not a proper structure. It will fall. But humanity comes first. And I entitled this presentation "The Other," because once you make someone the other, then things like the Holocaust happen, Rwanda happens, Bosnia happens, other tragedies around the world happen. Because once you distinguish the other person as not being of value, then you can do what you like to them. You're dehumanizing them. And that's why it's important, as Tom said earlier, that we find out what we have in common, not what separates us. And the DNA test is one method, but just common sense says that if I do harm to my neighbor, like a boomerang, it will come back at some stage or the other. If I don't treat the other person with respect, just as Auntie Gladys didn't look at our color, looked at us as small children and loved us for being small children. When you look to protect people like Mr. Nishaw from my primary school, who could have just taken me in the class and ignored the whole issue, like the couple that walked by when I was being beaten up by the gang, but they didn't. And Rotarians are the same. Rotarians can never sit still when they know there's something they can do for the community in any area of work, ecology, it could be to do with peace, it could be to do with making people earn, help them to have a profession where they can get income coming in and get onto their feet. In other words, learn how to fish as opposed to being given fish. That's what we do. Next slide, please. This is us, and thanks to Rudy, we went to the peace conference. We put the flags up. These are our heritage. We're both British. We both fight for Britain if we had to, but our heritage, motherland, is obviously in the subcontinent. Our ancestral homes are there, and we're there to wave the flag for peace. Next slide, please. And for all those people who are not Rotarians, I know it's a day late, but these are the things that Rotary can do for us, people who are looking for something to do. These are all the advantages of joining Rotary. Next slide, please. And this is what it does. It brings people together, whether it's polio, peace. This is in the Olympic Park, where we got loads of television personalities and together, as well as Rotarians, and we all working for a purpose. It's not about the other. We are all together. Thank you.
Mo, I think that was one of the most compelling speeches that I've heard in a long time here at Rotary. I found it to be very, very riveting, and really appreciate you sharing your personal experiences with us today. At this time, if anybody has any questions for Mo, please feel free to put them in the chat section here, and then we'll pass them on to Mo. Mo, right now you're in London. Were some of the pictures that you had mentioned Parliament, were some of those actually taken in Parliament?
Yes, that was Committee Room 11 in Parliament Building. And I mean, we sometimes don't realize in London what heritage we have, but we chose the Parliament because the Partition Act that separated the two parts of India happened in that building. So it's symbolic that we did the launch of the project in Parliament to kind of signify a new chapter. As Kennedy says, we can't fix a lot of the problems of the past, President Kennedy, but we can look towards the future and see what we can do in the future.
I have a question. There was recently, there was a huge conflict in the mountains between India and Pakistan.
Yes.
Was Rotary, any peace scholars involved in finally resolving that conflict?
When we did our launch, and maybe Case is listening here as well, we were in two minds because you had that Kashmir sort of skirmishes happening. What Case and other colleagues, and including yourselves, our vision is to have a peace park, which is, as we say, land from both areas, but not where the conflict is happening. And that to act as a kind of blueprint for what could happen. Because I don't know if many of you are aware of this, but probably you are. Kashmir itself is in 3 portions. China has a third, Pakistan have a third, and India has a third. And again, the madness of war, I mean, that area itself, if the 3 of them could get together, would be the Switzerland of the subcontinent. And our intention, as Rotarians do, with the UN and to build and help build institutions and organizations that can help with peace. The most important thing is changing people's hearts. We have to win people's hearts. The Peace Park acts as a independent, piece of land which anyone in the world can go to. More importantly, for the people of India and Pakistan to go and have picnics, to enjoy each other's company, because people to people will allow hearts to blossom in the sense of peace. Whereas if we stick to politics and the table tennis match that happens with that, then we're going to end up in a situation where nothing gets resolved. It's not about chess, it's about hearts, and it's about respect for people. People feel that they are being respected and they're safe, then peace can prosper. If people are feeling threatened, if you have fearmongers, especially politicians, they tend to be, not all, there's very, very good ones, as you know, but a lot of politicians, in order to get votes, they were frightening the people they need votes from. And unfortunately, during partition, anyone out there who's into change management and succession management will know that when the company of the Raj left, or the British left India and Pakistan, there was no change management. There was no succession management. It was a free for all. And then when the definition of whether you live or die or whether you get raped is your religion, that's a tragedy. It should never be the case. So we're building this peace park in memory of the 1.4 million innocent people who didn't make it to the other side.
Is there any hope for China?
Looking at the politics, because obviously, it's a very political question. Looking at the relationship between Pakistan and China and the leader of Pakistan at the moment, there always is. But I'll be honest, unless the Americans, and we can all facilitate as Rotarians, the Americans are the superpower. China and the rest, and most of the world will support a peace initiative. It's it just needs that extra support. I mean, Rotary principles and what we base our actions on is if we are engaging with Rotarians on the ground from India and Pakistan, and they're making major inroads. And eventually, this, a bit like COVID, this situation will pass by. As I say, this too will pass, and there will be favorable conditions. We planted seeds. Unfortunately, there's a monsoon going on at the moment, and all sorts of bad weather in terms of the political situation. But eventually, there will be sunshine, and you can't force a seed to grow. It will grow in its own time. And our job is to look not in a year's time, not to look in 10 years' time, but to look at it much longer term, because part of the Peace Park is the ecology factor, the factor that we have to look at climate change and other situations like as that. So it allows us a kind of a stage to do so many sort of faceted work and projects with our Indian and Pakistani Rotarians. People like myself and Tony and Case and yourself and other people, we're there to be there to kind of help the situation and facilitate people sitting around the table. But once they're sitting around the table, there's very bright people in India and Pakistan who can work out the problems and go get past them. Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
It looks like we've got questions in the chat here. I'm going to read one now. Is that how you'd like to do this, Skip?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. It says, when the Dayton Peace Accord was signed between Serbia and Herzegovina, all those who walked to the door to meet were men. There were 2 women in the photo of your large group. How did those 2 women qualify to participate? Could you say something about that? Great talk, Susan O'Neill.
Yes. Are you talking about the picture in the Parliament?
In the Dayton Peace Accord, all those who walked at the door met. Okay, whatever that is, there was only 2 women and a whole bunch of men. Maybe you could speak to that about women and women in Rotary.
I mean, we had a meeting quite recently, the India Peace Park Society, which is Case's heading, and we spoke about the fact that during partition, the major victims of rape and other atrocities were women. Both India and Pakistan supply troops to the UN peacekeeping services. And we have lots of female peacekeepers. And our vision is to see these UN female peacekeepers to be in the park, to allow people to feel comfortable. And also, I think women are better peacemakers than men, I'll be honest. They're able to do things that we can't do. And on our committee, we do have a few women. We're trying to increase the women. If I might make a generalization, I think us men, we spend more time fighting than actually trying to look at emotional intelligence and what's going on really with people's hearts. So I think we are the problem in some sense as well. But this particular project, we are pushing to get as many women involved, Rotarians, especially, to support us and be involved and guide us as well, because I think that's a very important question. It's a very good question.
I just wanted to say that one of the people in the civilian nonviolent peace force that has been training, Sultana, she's there on the screen. Some of you can see her, but I was in a peace training for her, and what they find is that people, peacekeepers, nonviolent, unarmed civilian peacekeepers is a whole nother thing that's supported through Rotary, and they're like 1/10 the price of an armed civilian peacekeeper, and they're quite a bit more effective. And the United Nations is attempting to fund them, perhaps more on a dollar for dollar basis. They're just a matter of value, but again, like Susan said, they're generally there's a lot of women. But this unarmed civilian peace force is a big new upcoming thing. from within the United Nations.
Thank you.
The other question I had, is there any more questions that people had about peace? I just, you've mentioned a virtual club and your virtual club experience. And, we've kind of been doing that now. A lot of clubs have been forced into sort of I call it a COVID e-club. But how do we engage new members in, doing something that matters, something other than talking? How do we have people do something with their hands, something that matters? How do you manage that within your virtual club, Mo?
In all clubs, you have different skill sets and people feeling more comfortable. Some people feel comfortable having a sort of dinner club or lunch club where they can eat, socialize, especially the older members of our club. But you're getting younger people now who want to do projects on the ground. Even during COVID, our members have been involved in delivering food and helping with food banks. There's always something that can be done, even in the most extreme circumstances. Even befriending, for example, ringing people up to make sure they're okay. Is there anything you need? I think kindness and Rotary, sort of service should be happening and is happening in almost any situation. It's made us think at the moment how important it is to also have that physical contact with one another. I'm looking at you, in normal circumstances. When I meet you, I'll be shaking your hands, giving you a hug, brotherly hug, and we would be eating together, discussing together in a nice, comfortable environment. It just means a different method. It's a different method which can complement. I mean, there's no way that I could have visualized me speaking to your club in this format. But to be honest, if we get the message out there that there's more of us and we're all together, and it kind of makes the world a smaller place. But at the same time, we know our core value is to go out there and physically get our hands dirty, go there and do tree planting, physically, change the environment around us in the most natural way. And I think it's just another learning curve for us.
Well, thanks.
May I put a question, Tom? Can I put a question?
Yes, please do.
Thank you very much, Mo. I think it was a fascinating lecture. I learned a lot from it. And I must say, I was totally surprised that you have tried to build relations between Pakistan and India. I've only been to those two countries once in my life. And of course, it was a big experience, and they are different from the places we usually get to. But in the end of the day, if we want to see changes, the changes are usually being made through a parliament, through a government. So basically, that means that besides having friends on both sides of the border, you can make groups, as you have mentioned, and they can be kind to each other, help each other. But if the governments are, I wouldn't say in war, but are not very friendly with each other, it's a problem. So how do you deal with politicians? How do you influence the politicians to understand that peace is better than war?
Very, very good question. I wish I had a magic wand for that one, but it's, as I said before, just like in the area of racism, you can tar a community, say, oh, they all like that, or they all do that. But in politics, we can also look at them cynically and say, oh, they're just in it for the vote. But there are some wonderful politicians there. We had the privilege of meeting the governor of Punjab, the Pakistan side, here in London. And that again is a geographic advantage of being in London, because many people and politicians and diplomats come to London. And we spoke to him, and myself and Immediate District Governor Tony Sharma, and we went to go and see him in his hotel while he was on a short stay here in the UK. And when he heard of our idea, he actually said to us, we're building a Kartarpur corridor for the Sikh community to go to their holy sites. We'd be happy to give you some of that land to build your peace park. So we're nearly halfway there. We just need to show that there is this commitment, and it is there people to people. Some politicians are trying to divide communities, and everyone has their view of who they are, and without being political ourselves. But eventually, we will meet the right person in India, and we're working on that. And then when you get the right people there, because part of the Peace Park is also to recognize that these atrocities happened, because one side is looking at the other side and saying, well, it's their fault. It's their fault. But once you recognize it was everyone's fault, then you can start a new chapter and a new beginning. And part of what we're trying to do is to build an environment where people can come together. And with your help and other people around the world, and Rotarians especially, we're looking at the Peace Park to also incorporate a peace center. So once you get academics from both sides, the Punjab University on the Pakistani side and the Punjab University on the Indian side, you get professors and intellectuals coming together. There's no problem that's insurmountable if there's a will. And most importantly, the centerpiece of our park will be a tree from Hiroshima, symbolizing the fact that if there's no peace, then if someone accidentally pressed the button, then it's an end game. Rather than get to that state, let's stop those aggressive gestures and work together to look after our environment and make places where people are comfortable and safe. So it is trying to change people's, we can't work so fast with the politicians, but once people start to meet people, it's almost like when you go to a shop and there's a crowd outside the shop, you wonder what the deal is. You get interested. Then when you find out what it is, you might want to get in there and buy something. So we're selling peace, but we're selling peace in the most humanistic way we can, which is bringing people together. But we will work on the politicians as well. Thank you.
Mo, thank you very much. We really appreciate you joining us today. I think we all got a lot out of that. Boy, how much better the world would be if we all, took what you had to say to heart and actually put it into action. Yes.
I would just wanted to thank Mo as well. I also see that Al Jubitz is on the screen here. Maybe you can wave at us, Al. Al is the founding chair of the Rotary Action Group for Peace and has been very active in peace around the world. And I want Mo and Al to have a conversation offline. But Al, do you have any quick words for us?
Yes, the Peace Park's a wonderful idea, Mo. Thank you. And that's a very critical area, obviously, a very important Peace Park area. But there's 125 or more Peace Parks around the world. And the first one, of course, was between the United States and Canada. As you know, people from that region are on this call. But that was done in 2 years by Rotarians through Congress, United States Congress, in 2 years. That's amazing. Well, it worked at that time, I guess. But at any rate, it can be done. I agree with your approach. And I think peace parks are wonderful symbols to build a culture of peace anywhere there's been conflict in the world. It is important that we Rotarians lead that charge. And I really appreciate your efforts and want to help you in any way I can.
Thank you, Al. And for those of you that may not know it, we Rotarians here in San Miguel de Allende have our own peace pole, and there it is. Tom, you can talk much more eloquently about this than me.
Well, I would just say that I wish there were more pictures of the children. I don't know, Ron, whether you have any more from that, but when the United Nations lady Fumi Johns passed out,
there we are.
There was over 100 flags that children, and they would say, may peace prevail in Israel, may peace prevail in Mexico, and they hand the kid the flag, and then they'd wave it, and we all kind of walked from the peace pole up to the Hardin, and just to have the children, be involved in peace, and then the over 500 of them put their wishes for peace into the time capsule and what they hope for peace in 50 years. So, the children are the key. The children are the future. We can do a lot, but they're the future.
And there it is. Unfortunately, right now, that's in Juarez Park, and the park is closed to the public right now because of COVID-19. But when they do reopen, it's worth taking a stroll over to the park and taking a look at it. All right. With that, we're just a little bit over time, but we want to thank Mo and all of our guest Rotarians who joined us this morning. We have a very interesting speaker next week. It might have something to do with peace, and it is the United States and the European Union, friend or foe. And we have a very distinguished guest joining us next week.